People are still talking about Senator Chris Murphy's emotional filibuster pushing for gun control, especially when he spoke about 6-year-old Dylan Hockley, who was killed at Sandy Hook. Dylan's mom, Nicole, will join us. Then Congresswoman Nita Lowey, she's here on the subject of guns in America and whether or not this will be a tipping point where something finally gets done. Also, World Series champ Ron Darling joins us. The 1986 Mets, the wins, the controversies. Well, Darling, he talks about it all. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you for joining us tonight. People are still talking about that emotional filibuster that Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut delivered on the subject of guns in this country. We wanted to play again for you a portion of that emotional address.
I want to introduce you to Dylan Christopher Jack Hockley, who in this picture is age 6. Dylan was struggling with autism as a student at Sandy Hook Elementary School, but he was a special boy who is going to turn into a special young man. He idolized his brother Jake, but he idolized someone else as well. He idolized a woman named Anne Marie Murphy. Anne Marie Murphy was his special education teacher and his personal aide. When Adam Lanza walked into that classroom and aimed his military-style assault weapon with clips attached to it holding 30 bullets, Anne Marie Murphy probably had a chance to run or to hide or to panic. And instead, Anne Marie Murphy made the most courageous decision that any of us could imagine. Instead of running, instead of hiding, instead of panicking, Anne Marie Murphy found Dylan Hockley and embraced him. You know why we know that? Because when the police entered the classroom, that's how they found Dylan Hockley.
After that filibuster, there was an agreement with Republicans to vote on some measures as early as this coming Monday. Now, this is what they're going to vote on. A bill that would prevent people on the FBI's terror watch list from buying guns, and also expanding background checks to include gun show and internet sales. That's it. But Senator Murphy, he's unhappy with the changes the GOP wants to make to already this limited piece of legislation.
The Republican amendments are laughable. They're written by the NRA. They make this country less safe.
And joining us right now on the phone is Nicole Hockley. You just heard Senator Murphy talk about her son Dylan, who is one of those first graders who's no longer with us from that tragedy in Sandy Hook. And she is also the founder and managing director of Sandy Hook Promise. Nicole, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it.
First off, for the families in Orlando, you're unfortunately part of that terrible sorority of moms who lost their children to mass shootings. What are those people going through right now?
Well, the truth is that loss and grief is very unique for every family. So while I do have a very strong sense of what they're going through, you know, they'll also be experiencing things in their own way. In terms of where the similarities are, the confusion, the anger, the total lack of control and understanding and trust, it's massive. And I think every victim I've talked to through the years, including myself, that initial shock that just breaks you down so quickly. I'm sure they're going through that, because how can you possibly understand why someone would do this and take so many lives so quickly for a reason that just can't be understood.
And I'm sure Sunday, Orlando must have brought back everything from that awful December morning for you.
Absolutely. It was, I immediately went straight into shock again and kind of shut down, because it's just too hard to process that this continues to happen, that it has happened yet again, that it was another preventable tragedy where lives could have been saved and weren't. It made me incredibly heartbroken and incredibly angry, because this just is not acceptable, and we keep going in circles without ever finding a way to move forward. And I'm sick of the ongoing fighting. People are dying, and we all have a responsibility. Every person in every home and community, and our legislators, we have a responsibility to do something, and we have the capacity and capability to do something. So stop letting this happen. This can't be allowed to continue anymore.
Nicole, we just showed our audience, as we did yesterday, a part of what Senator Murphy said from the floor of the Senate, invoking Dylan and showing his photo. What was that moment like for you when you saw it?
You know, I've had the honor of working with Senator Murphy over the past 3 years. I've seen him become an incredibly powerful advocate. He has always been incredibly supportive of families from Sandy Hook, but his commitment to creating change and saving the lives of others really goes above and beyond the call of duty. I was humbled that he would share Dylan's story and Mrs. Murphy's story, and I do think it is an example for our legislators to consider that in times of tragedy, we can run away or we can be courageous and take action. And that's what Mrs. Murphy did. You know, she reached out in love and with bravery, without concern for herself, in order to help someone else. And I think it's a very strong analogy for what our legislators need to do and stop being so concerned about their political careers or finances and focus on what can we do to reach out and help other people who need it.
I'm curious, when I heard that they're going to have a vote, as they will next week, to at least put name, whether they support or oppose some version of taking someone from a no-fly list and at least putting them on a no-gun buy list. Is it pathetic that that counts as real progress right now? As we showed, the same Senator Murphy was frustrated that it's a watered-down version of what he wants. Should we take any small incremental steps, or are you frustrated that it's still so small considering what we should be doing and where the public seems to be on this, if you believe the polls?
It's a really hard one because we are talking about significant change that's required. And for me, progress is progress. As long as we're taking steps in the right direction, we're going to be saving lives along the way. What I don't want to see happen is, what should never happen is for a watered-down bill that actually is not meaningful, that won't actually really create any difference. That should not go forward. That's not good enough. And if it's so watered down that it's meaningless, then it's just an empty act that then allows people to say, you know, well, that's it, we did something, you know, problem solved. If it has meaning, no matter how hard it is, then it should absolutely be pushed forward, and we should strive to do the best that we possibly can do, but always with an eye to, okay, this is step one. What is step two? So if we get the terror gap watch list sorted today and background checks tomorrow, should we be looking at gun violence restraining orders next, so that there's a process for people who are displaying at-risk behaviors to have their weapons removed for them for a certain period of time. This is progress, and it's not about restricting rights. It's not about taking away guns. It's about ensuring that someone who is not in the right frame of mind, who is intent on harming themselves or harming someone else, does not have that easy access to weapons. It's that wellness and access that is causing tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, whether it be the lives that are lost every day or the lives that are lost in mass shootings. So I do think our congressmen have a responsibility to take action in a meaningful way, and then to think about what's the next action we can take. What else can we do to help protect people and save lives?
Last thing, Nicole, this December will be unbelievably 4 years since the tragedy of Newtown, and many of us felt after that tragedy that we were, as a country, come together and make some real meaningful changes. 90% of this country agrees on universal background checks, so we thought it would happen. We know where we are, more specifically, are not today. With all the work that you've done with Sandy Hook Promise and all the lawmakers you've heard publicly and behind closed doors tell you, do you have reason for optimism that we're really going to address this issue? Or do you think, unfortunately, we're just in such a divided place right now, we just can't get anything meaningful done?
I have to stay optimistic because I don't view this as a hopeless and helpless situation. I know that there are things that can be done. They're just not happening fast enough, which is frustrating. But I do believe that this change is inevitable. The will of the people will prevail, and right will prevail. But when you think about background checks in 2013 and 90% of Americans wanted it, we had a problem because 90% of Americans, though, didn't engage. They didn't make their voices heard. And the voices were only heard from the minority of extremists who oppose this. And if that's what legislators are hearing, that's what they're going to respond to. So anyone who thinks my voice doesn't matter, this is too big of an issue, you're wrong. You have a right to you have a responsibility to make your voice heard, because that is what is going to change the voters, the votes, in the way that they happen. We have an opportunity to do things within our own communities, and that's what Sandy Hook Promise is doing by teaching people how to know the signs, how to identify someone who's at risk, and then take intervention. And we're seeing tremendous progress there. We've stopped a school shooting already. We've stopped multiple suicides. We've stopped multiple threats of firearms coming into schools. In the last year, we've trained 865,000 students, and we are expanding quickly. But we also need to ensure that appropriate access is maintained and that people are not getting their hands so easily on these weapons that can kill so many in such a short time. So yes, I have hope. I have optimism, because this is within our power to do. This is within our reach. It's just about having your voice be heard, stand up for making change, and add to this growing movement that is demanding action take place.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much. Best of luck, obviously, with Sandy Hook Promise. And let's hope next week Washington follows through, at least for this time, with a promise to finally give some justice to those victims. Nicole Hockley, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now, when we come back, everyone, I'm going to sit down one-on-one with a member of Washington, specifically Congresswoman Nita Lowey. We're going to talk about, among other things, guns, the election coming up, and much more. Please stay with us.